rest of the family that you would come out today. We know circumstances are very different this year than it would have been this time last year. This place would have been full, and the overflow would have been full of those who would love to have been here to honor and recognize David. But thank you for being here. And again, if any of you want more space, you could just slip out in the back, and we do have another room available. There are a few folks that are already over there, and you could sit and observe the service as well. If you have friends or family that could not make it here today but would like to have been part of this, you can go to the New Hope Facebook page, and you can click on the screen that will have Dave Duke's name on it, and you would be able to watch it at any time, and it will be there for a couple of months. You can also go to YouTube and type in New Hope Community Church, David Dukes, and you'll be able to find it that way. So you can let friends and family know that as well. I'm glad you've come out today for several reasons. First off, I'm glad those of you who are David's family, I'm glad that you were here. You have a unique bond with David. We need each other on days like today. It helps us with closure because we share common time, common love, and common memories. Those of you who are friends, I'm glad you were here today. You make a difference for the family, that somebody else besides them loved David Dukes. I'm a pastor, you're in church, so I've got a bias. I'm glad that God is here today. He shows up at every one of these services, whether it's in church, whether it's at a cemetery, whether it's in a backyard. During this last COVID year, I have done services in just about any place you can imagine, including a bar. And guess what? God showed up there. He shows up everywhere because he made a promise thousands of years ago, and he says, I'm the God of all comfort. And he doesn't tell us we will not sorrow, because we wouldn't need comfort if we didn't sorrow. But he says, I'm the God of all comfort. I will come and be with you. But he never forces his way in. He never demands attention, but he always shows up. He will make a difference for all of us if we let him. And I've added a new piece to what I normally say at this moment, and that is, I'm also glad that I'm here. I wished it was for another reason, but I am grateful to have been David's friend since we were 17 and 18 years old. I'm grateful to have been the very last one to whisper a prayer in his ear as he spent his last minute on earth and he experienced his first minute in heaven. I had received a text from Lori showing me what his blood pressure was and what his oxygen level was, and it was not very good. I was in Texas at the moment, but thank God for cell phones. And so I was able to place a call, chatted with Lori for a few moments, and I said, put the phone down to David's ear. And he couldn't talk, but he did grunt. And I took that as a good sign at that moment. He sort of grunted at a bit of humor that I shared, and then I asked if I could pray. And together we prayed. And when I hung up, it was only about 34 seconds later that the text came, David's in heaven. And so I am grateful for that time with David. David, like the rest of us in this room, was a flawed individual. He was not perfect. God loves us in spite of our flaws, but our purpose here today is not to accentuate or to ignore his flaws, but it is to honor his strength in spite of his weaknesses. And I hope, in spite of those weaknesses and because of his strength, we can be inspired to let God work on our flaws in the remainder of our days. Let me share with you my personal thoughts, and then we'll talk about David himself. In my mind, David was a huge contradiction. He was short on education, but he was long on smarts. He was stubborn on some things, but quite frankly, most of the time he was pretty easygoing. That's why he got along with most of you. He had a short fuse occasionally, but he also could be pretty patient. He could give the impression of being gruff and hard, yet he was also very tender, and I saw frequently tears flow down his cheeks. He could hold a grudge, right, brothers? But he could also forgive graciously. He was an overachiever. He was a hard worker. In my mind, he was a proof you can live the American dream. He worked hard for it. Perspective is very important for us today. I understand, and I knew this, that David loved trucks and motorcycles throughout his life. So this is a perfect story to set perspective for David's service today. It was late one summer evening at a place called Broken Bow, Nebraska, and a very tired truck driver pulled his rig into an all-night truck stop. The waitress had just served him when three tough-looking, leather-jacketed motorcyclists of the Hells Angels brand decided to give this trucker a hard time. Not only did they verbally abuse him, one grabbed the hamburger off his plate and took a bite out of it and set it back down. Another took a handful of fries, and the third picked up a cup of coffee and took a sip out of it. How would you have responded if they had done that to you? This trucker didn't do any of things you would have expected. Instead, he calmly rose, picked up his check, walked to the cashier, paid for it, walked out the door. The waitress followed him, put the money in the till, and stood watching from the door as that big truck driver drove away in the night. When she returned, one of the bikers said to her, "Not much of a man, was he?" She replied, "I don't know what kind of man he is, but I know he's not much of a truck driver. He just ran over 3 motorcycles on his way out of here." Perspective is important, how we sometimes look at things and what the outcomes are. One other perspective, Gayleen Allen would have loved to have been here, but had some surgery recently and can't be. I chatted with her a bit today, and I understand, and George, I can't remember if it was you she had this conversation with or which one of the Dukes boys, but she told me of a story that one of you all had said something to her dad about wishing that he hadn't have influenced your family towards diesel mechanics, that you all could have become brain surgeons if you had to gone into diesel mechanics. That's the setup for this last perspective, all right? Morris was a loudmouth mechanic. He was removing cylinder heads from the motor of a car when he spotted a famous heart surgeon who was standing off to the side waiting for his vehicle. Morris shouted across the garage, "Hey, Doc, is that you? Come on over here a minute." Famous surgeon, a bit surprised, walked over to where Morris the mechanic was working on the vehicle. Morris straightened up, wiped his hands on the rag, and asked argumentatively, "So, Mr. Fancy Pants Doctor, look at this work I'm doing here. I also open hearts. I take valves out, I grind them, I put in new parts, and I'm finished. This baby will purr like a kitten. So how come you get the big bucks when you and I are basically doing the same work?" The surgeon leaned over and whispered to Morris, "Try doing it when the engine is running." That's the difference. Perspective about living and dying and eternity is important. And I don't know what your perspective is, and I can't make your perspective be the same as mine, but here's what I do know. We all are going to die. Every one of us in this room, someday there'll be a service similar to this somewhere, maybe in a bar, but there'll be a service like this for you. You can either think there's something better than this world. Man, after we survive 2020, there's got to be something better, right? Or we're food for worms. This is all there is, and there's nothing more. And you can choose to believe that. And if you do, then live like hell now and don't worry about it. But if you have the hope that there is something better, if you want to believe that there is something greater than this life, then we need to investigate it now and not just wait and see how things turn out. So let's take the next few minutes and let's honor and celebrate the life of David Dukes. He was born 64 years ago in Red Bluff, California on April the 10th, 1956. Anybody in this family know what day of the week David was born on? Don't feel bad. I've asked this question hundreds of times and only 2 people have ever guessed it right. David was born on a Tuesday. Okay? So Tuesdays will have new meaning for you now. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president at the time of his birth. And there were some classic movies that came out that year. Most of us in this room, as I look at your age, you will recognize most of these titles, okay? You probably won't. Yeah, but that's okay. Here, John Wayne had the top movie of the year, and Natalie Wood was in it. Anybody want to guess which one it was? Natalie Wood, John Wayne. The Searchers. One of his classic movies. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original, and Forbidden Planet came out that year. Another blockbuster was Giant with Liz Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean. Charlton Heston, all right, remove it from my cold, dead hands, that guy. His biggest movie, what was it? 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments came out that year with Yul Brynner. Moby Dick was out that year with Gregory Peck. Sean, I know why you're an Elvis Presley fan. The year your dad was born, Elvis Presley had 5 top hits in the top 10 that year. Amongst those were Heartbreak Hotel, Don't Be Cruel, Hound Dog, Love Me Tender, I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. 5 of the top 10 movies that year. Doris Day had Que Sera Sera. Dean Martin had Memories Are Made of This. Pat Boone had I Almost Lost My Mind. Carl Perkins, Blue Suede Shoes. And Tennessee Ernie Ford rounded out the top 10 with his ballad, 16 Tons. That was one of my favorites. David shared his birthday with some pretty significant people in his life. Not the year, but the date, April the 10th. William Booth. Anybody know what he's famous for? Do not say assassinating President Lincoln. That would not be correct. William Booth was known as the founder of Salvation Army. He was born on David's birthday in 1829. How many of you know who Colonel Potter is? Yeah, for MASH? Yeah, Harry Morgan, born on the same day, 1915. Chuck Connors? Baseball player, right? Yes, he was, before he became the rifleman, all right? Also shared a birthday with Dave Dukes. John Madden and Dandy Don Meredith, those 2 football announcers and players, all right? Both born on the same day, along with David Dukes. Ken Griffey Sr., baseball player, April 10th. And last, Steven Seagal, martial arts and actor, all shared David's birthday. His parents were George and Catherine, and he shared his parents with 3 brothers and 4 sisters. Can you guys get your head around that? 4 Duke women, 4 Duke men, all in the same family right there, all right? Who would be the tiebreaker in making the votes? Yeah, Mom, all right. Shirley is the one who preceded David in her death. Janie lives in Idaho. Joyce lives in Idaho. Jenna lives in Selma. George and Jan live in Madera. TJ and Luann in Sacramento. And Donnie and Debbie right on the border of Fresno, Clovis. They can't make up their mind if they want to live in the dark side or the light side, all right? But David moved to Fresno when he was very young. He attended Roosevelt, but his education was interrupted by marriage and fatherhood. And in 1973, he married Marilyn Little, and their nearly 20-year marriage was blessed with 2 children, a son and a daughter. Sean resides in Clovis. Jennifer and her husband, Jimmy, is it Clovis also? All right, good job. You're in the light side. I'm sorry, Fresno. 4 grandchildren, Macy, Annalise, Adrian, and Brooklyn. In 1994, David met Lori Ushering on December the 17th, 2005 at a Christmas party that David enjoyed hosting, and I got to be part of some of those Christmas parties these last few years when I moved into the neighborhood. David surprised Lori in 2005 with not only a proposal, but a wedding. She didn't know anything about either or that night, and David was ready for both. He even had a preacher available in the hopeful expectation that she would say yes. Cecil Spurlock, who happens to be here today, was there that day and did the duties. Lori also had a son and a daughter. Christy Martinez and her husband Tyler live in Coarsegold, and Jim, her son, lives in Cheyenne, Wyoming, blessed with 4 more grandchildren, Macy, Travis, James, and Hannah. Lori, you were vigilant in your care for David. These last 18 months, you hardly ever left his side. You made sure his needs were taken care of. Whatever he wanted done, regards to his own care or around your home. That included building a cement fence and a mammoth metal gate that he insisted be completed all the way up to his hospice care. He carried through. God bless you. David was never afraid of work. He became engaged in diesel repair at the age of 18. He eventually became, I understand, shop foreman at Ryden Truck Center. Did I get the name of that one right? Ryden? Okay. And then he went to G&H Diesel. Happened to have a family connection there in 1991, I believe is what you told me. And that's where he's hung his hat for almost the last. He's an employee, a working partner, and then the owner. And if y'all don't know that G&H stands for George and Hank. And Hank is not a bird dog. That's for those of you who watch the Hank show on TV, all right? His hobbies, David's hobbies were work. I think David may have been the happiest when he was working. He also liked his Corvette Club. How many Corvette Club members are here? Raise your hand. All right, boom, 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 boom. All right, terrific. And he enjoyed that. He owned a 2017. He enjoyed motorcycles. Started out with dirt bikes and advanced to Harleys and even a Victory. He enjoyed listening to his police scanner. One of the things that I'm going to miss is the frequency in which law enforcement helicopters raid our neighborhood. we have guests over at our house and they hear it and they see it and they say, "What's going on? I thought this was a safe neighbor." It's just friends of Dave Dukes. Don't worry about it. It's all safe. His travels, he enjoyed his monthly trips to Pismo. His last long road trip was to Wyoming. His favorite foods were a good steak with potatoes, and maybe the top of the list was pork chops. He enjoyed ice cream, particularly more recently from a place I have never been, Roly Rollies. Did I get it right? All right, I'm going to have to check it out. Never been there. His favorite thing to watch on TV, which was not often because he didn't watch a whole lot of TV, was Impractical Jokers. Sounds like a perfect program for David. True TV and news. His favorite music is what you were listening to as you entered here today. If you didn't recognize the voice of George Jones, shame on you. You'll hear him again when you leave today. His favorite sport was NASCAR, all right? And you'll see a picture up here, Interstate Batteries, particularly when Kyle Busch was driving for them, was his favorites. Club and civic organizations he was a part of. He was a 10-year volunteer for Fresno PD. You see the McGruff crime dog head here, all right? That was on David's head on frequent occasions. He also volunteered to work checkpoints. I find this so interesting because when I first met David, when we were teenagers, I thought, man, if there was ever a guy who had a chance to get arrested a few times, it would be David. And he ended up exactly on the opposite side of that and loved what he did. This is something I didn't know, and I can't tell you too much about the details, but he was a TSA undercover tool on 2 occasions. And the sad thing is, he was successful. I'll leave it at that. He was also a part of the Central Valley Corvette, and he was a member of the Elks Club. I met David because of Maryland. We were all part of the same church, and David started attending way back then at Memorial Field Baptist Church, where my dad was the pastor. I had the privilege of being his pastor then, about 15 years later. And then 3 years ago, I had the privilege of being his pastor and his neighbor again. Over the last couple of years, he and Lori would attend here, and after he was diagnosed with his brain tumor and cancer and was already going through treatment, he wanted to come. And so we would sneak them in the side door after everybody else was in. We would reserve a section right there at the end of the front row so nobody would be right around him. And they would slip in and be here for service and slip out. And once that was no longer possible, when COVID hit, they were regulars on live stream. We would always get the text, "We're watching." And so it was a privilege to not only be his friend, but to be his pastor. Various folks gave me descriptions of Dave, and they said it like this: he was loving, he was smart, he was dedicated, he was meticulous, he was detailed. He never stopped learning. He planned well. He liked to laugh. He took good care of his equipment, his animals, and his family. He had a good laugh, and he certainly had a delightful smile. David loved his backyard parties. One of the reasons I think he put in such a nice backyard was he enjoyed having people over. I met some of you in his backyard, in fact. David had a peculiar habit. Oh, doggone it, we forgot the cup and spoon. David had a habit. He got up every morning at 4:56. 4:56. Set his alarm. Do you know why he got up at 4:56? Exactly correct. That was his birthday. April, the 4th month, 56th a year. So he got up every morning. Weekdays, weekends. Year in, year out. Before he would go to work, Lori would not be out of bed yet. He would make her a cup of coffee. He would bring it to her in a mug with a spoon. And he would play the Folgers commercial tune on the cup with the spoon as he took it into her. And that was every single day. I didn't know he could play an instrument. I was also asked if I would make special thanks to the staff at Heritage Crossing. Unsure if any of them were able to make it today. Oh, right there. Thank you. So you'll take this back to everybody there. Special thanks to you for all of your care that you provided for him there. On the occasions when I was there, you all were very, very wonderful to him, and so thank you for doing that. For some other perspectives and reflections besides what you've heard from me today, we've got a couple of friends and a relative. So Todd Frazier from Fresno PD, come on up. I always have to do this. I have to raise it for taller people.
I'm pretty good at that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Well, some of you who know me really well know that I'm usually late, and I got here just a couple of minutes before the services start. And I had a little speech prepared, but guess what? The phone rang right before I left my office, and I left that behind. I managed to bring my glasses to read it, so unfortunately, I don't have the speech or what I was going to say. But what I have to say, really, all right here. So if it's a little disjointed, I apologize. So let's go through my time with Dave. I had the opportunity to meet Dave about 14, 15 years ago, and at that time, I lived in a cul-de-sac, and we used to have raging 4th of July parties, you know, with the safe and sane fireworks. And a mutual friend of ours contacted me a few days before and said, hey, I got a really good friend of mine and his wife, and we'd really like to have them come on by and join you and everyone else at the block party on the 4th of July. I said, well, if he's a friend of yours, he's a friend of mine. Bring him on over. So I first got to meet Dave and Lori at the block party in front of my house on the 4th of July 14, 15 years ago, approximately, right? So we hit it off. We talked. We did a lot of talking that day, and it kind of grew from there, right? So we continued to talk, and we'd meet up, and our friendship grew, and it got to the point where I think I was better friends with Dave and Lori than Jim was with Dave, right? So we'd get together for dinners often, and especially lunches. Dave and I think we had something where if we weren't doing anything for lunch, we were kind of like the last resort to call, you know, either Dave or he'd call me and, hey, you're not doing anything, right? I'm not doing anything. Yeah, so let's go do lunch, right? So we would meet up at whether Castillo's, right? Steve, that's your place, the 7th and Ventura, way down there. Or we would meet up at the Cosmo downtown. That was one of Dave's favorite places. Or a little Chinese place on the corner of Cedar and Butler. I drove by it a million times, never eaten there, and Dave wanted to go there that one time, and we went there several times after that. We'd have some great conversations. Dave and I really enjoyed those. We'd talk about everything under the sun, whether it's politics or spouses, or just traveling, or where we'd like to go. Or, of course, I would have to hear how about his monthly or trips to Pismo Beach with Lori, right? So they'd always have trips planned to Pismo, and I was kind of jealous. I know a lot of times, oh, well, I want to go too. And Lori had planned out their trips months and years in advance, it seems like, to go out to Pismo. But, you know, so we really enjoyed that time. And so then as things kind of progressed, right, Lori became a Citizen on Patrol volunteer. And I go, kind of interesting. All right. And apparently she was spending so much time. Dave goes, well, shoot, I'm not seeing my wife. So he joined. And they were spending a lot of times out there and whatnot, and driving around patrolling. And guess what? I became Dave's boss, because I became the overseer or the coordinator for the Citizen on Patrol volunteer program at the PD. So it's kind of funny, right? Dave's always looked at them from potentially harming someone else, right? And we see and hear a lot lately about DUI drivers crashing. I'll tell you, that's hugely important, and to get those officers out there. And so they were part of something very important and vital to help us and help our officers and serving our community to try and rid DUIs and get those DUI drivers off the streets. So they really were beloved by our motor unit, and that's why you hear the helicopter flying over the house, or the motor officers showing up at whether it's Heritage Crossing or at their parties or at their house or birthdays, whatever. It's because they have done so much for us, and it was just a little bit that we could try and repay them for the vast amount of support they provided us. So, and then you see McGruff, how that all came about. I needed a McGruff for our community event. And so Dave is the only one who didn't say no. And so here you go, Dave, and he got this, you know, head and had an overcoat, looked like a, well, I hate to say it, but, you know, if you didn't wear pants underneath that coat, it could be a problem. But Dave always obviously was well attired for that. But he got that set up. It was in a box or a bag or something like that. It was kind of ratty. Nobody was really taking care of it. And so, of course, Dave doesn't want to put something ratty on his head, or wear it. So he got it all cleaned up, fixed what was broken on it. And then he was out there at the event, and, well, that's history. I mean, all of a sudden he became McGruff. And whenever I needed him to go to a community event to be McGruff the crime dog, there he was. And he enjoyed it. And Lori was always by his side, making sure he didn't walk into trees or other people or whatnot, tripping over something. And so it was, he really enjoyed it. And so he goes, I put some money and time in cleaning that McGruff uniform and head. He wasn't going to give it up. He wasn't going to let anyone else use it. So it's basically, I'm going to take it. It's been kind of bequeathed to Dave Dukes and Lori now. But he loved it. And we, like I said, we really enjoyed them coming on out and whatnot. Another thing Dave got involved in was Crime Stoppers. He became a donor to Crime Stoppers, and I see, we're well represented here. Thank you. And he donated time. He donated money to such a vital piece of crime prevention in our community. And when one thing about Dave, and if you all know him like I know him, he's not just a talker. He's a doer, right? And that's what he did. He knows that we had a problem in our community. He wanted to do something about it, whether it's crime or whatnot. He went out there and did something. He just didn't complain about it. He did something about it. And I'll tell you, as a Citizen on Patrol volunteer, he and Lori put in over 100 hours a month. Now, mind you, he's managing and owning a diesel repair place, and it's a successful company, but he was also on the weekends putting in all this time patrolling the streets and making sure DUIs were getting off the street and officers were able to get back into service. It reminds me of a little story that Dave and Lori were involved in. They were out there patrolling one night. Now, mind you, COPs are not allowed to take any enforcement action. They don't arrest people. They don't do anything. They are to observe and report. Well, on this particular case, they were following, or just happened, I don't know if Dave kind of got in there, but they just happened to be behind a DUI, or it was a pretty obvious guy who was swerving all over the road. And so Dave and Lori, or probably, who worked the radio, Dave or you, Lori? Yeah. Okay, so Lori got on the radio and said, hey, we got a potential DUI. Well, like most nights out there, lots of traffic, lots of busy calls for service, and it took a long time for an officer to get to them. Well, they continued to follow, and now guy pulls into a parking lot of some sort of business, and well, Dave and Lori pull in and kind of happen to block them in, or park there, and guy goes into a business, comes on out, and Dave and Lori are there, and they kind of stop him, but they don't really. They're just talking to him until an officer got to him. But again, he just couldn't let it go. And who would want that guy that they were following to go, because he could have killed somebody? And they felt they could have done something to, hold on to that guy without holding on to him. And so it's just little acts like that, even though they weren't supposed to do it. And they got a little bit of trouble for it. But again, that's just, it tells you what type of person he is. So let's go further. Like I said, I had the speech all ready to go, and anyway, so I know I was doing pretty good, and all of a sudden I got this memory block. Right, Pastor? All right, help me out. Give me some divine intervention. Anyway, right? Well, okay, came to mind. Let's talk about travel. One thing I'll never forget is the time that Dave and I, when we'd meet for lunch, and right after he was stricken and he was diagnosed with the cancer, we had lunch at the Cosmo. You probably remember it. And we spent a little time talking about everything like we normally do. Lori was there. But we got to talking about, where have you been, Dave? We're talking about, I think we were talking about me being in San Diego. I'm from San Diego. And he goes, yeah, or you mentioned that you'd never been to San Diego. What? And then we got into a conversation about some of the other places they haven't been to. Haven't been to San Diego or Sacramento or Monterey. I go, what? But we had been to San Francisco. We took a couple of trips up to San Francisco. It's funny, Dave, every time we'd want to go do something, well, I don't like to drive, would you mind driving? You can use my car, but we want you to drive. Okay, right. So we made a couple of trips to San Francisco. Dave was always sitting there, and it's kind of interesting, we'd sit there, it's quiet, or we're just having some casual conversation. Out of the blue, Dave would start laughing about something. What are you laughing about, Dave? I was thinking about something or whatever. Or he'd come up, a lot of you who know him, he comes up with some of the corniest jokes, right? So, and then he would just bust up laughing. And so I really miss those times. It just, would it be quiet or whatever, or we're having some sort of conversation about politics or food or travel or whatever, and all of a sudden he'd just bust up laughing out of the blue, and spontaneously, we don't know what happened, but it drove him into that laughter. So those are kind of fun trips, and we enjoyed those. But getting back, we're sitting at the Cosmo talking about going places, right? And so Dave, he wasn't the most ambulatory at that time, but he was still able to get around. And so we started making a plan. Okay, I'm going to take time off now. Most of you know me, I don't take a lot of time off of work, but I wanted to take time off to drive Dave wherever he wanted to go, because we knew his time here was limited. And I wanted him to experience some things just in our backyard, whether it's down south, or Sacramento, or even over in Monterey. So we had started working a plan, and we didn't get dates down, but we had the plan, and we're going to put it in motion. And I was going to take time off, right, to drive him. And unfortunately, a couple of days later is when he had that catastrophic stroke, and unfortunately, we couldn't carry out that plan and those fun times that we were looking forward to. So, it's kind of interesting. I know Dave was part of the Corvette Club. It's funny. He always told me, I don't want to drive. You drive, this and that. It's funny. He drove a police car, maybe 10, 12 hours in a shift when he was out there, right? Corvette Club. You have to drive. I know. I've heard of some of the trips you guys would take all over to Kingdom Come, and I think he was pulling my leg. I think he just enjoyed me. Driving him around, and but something, I don't care. It's spending time with good friends and family, and is the most valuable thing. And just a couple of morals of the story is, just live your life, and if that good friend says, hey, drive me somewhere, spend a moment, because you never know when you're going to be able to get that time. So just a simple drive somewhere, whether it's across town or San Francisco or to the coast. You never know when those times are going to stop. So I'm going to miss Dave.
Well, at least
good idea. So he tells me 6 o'clock on Tuesday out at, what was the restaurant? Yosemite Falls. 6 o'clock on Tuesday, I get to Yosemite Falls, and I ask him, is there a Corvette Club meeting here? And they said, yes, in the back room. I go in the back room, and there was people there that I knew, and I had dinner with them and everything, and they talked about the Corvette Club. And afterwards, I called Dave. Dave, where were you? I was at the Corvette Club. Where were you? I was at the Corvette Club. You weren't there. Come to find out, there was another Corvette Club. They met at Yosemite Falls at 6 o'clock on Tuesday over on 99 in Ashland. So eventually I got over there and joined the club with Dave, and we had some great times. So thank you for the Corvette Club for having all the Corvettes out there in honor of him. Dave Duke, he had a lot of qualities, and he was he had a lot of kindness and generosity. There's probably a lot of people here that he was very generous to in a lot of different ways. He always had his arms stretched out, doing things for other people. I was a beneficiary of a lot of that too. Every year, Dave would gather a group of friends, and off to Las Vegas we would go. There's a picture down here of a group, one of the groups that we went to Las Vegas for the weekend of fun. In NASCAR, here we come. That had a hospitality tent full of food and drinks and gifts, and we got to meet the car drivers and the owners, and we had the best weekend ever at these events. And he was very kind to invite all these friends to these things, and he had a great time too. Except for the time that my wife and I got stuck in the elevator. But I have a saying that I say, and it's to have a friend, you have to be a friend first. Dave was that kind of guy. Dave was always that person with the stretched out hands. He would be there to help you in any way he could. Dave loved his work, G&H Diesel. That was his life. I mean, he was up early and he was down there taking care of things, and he loved it. More than that love, Dave loved the guys that worked with him. He appreciated every one of them, and we used to talk about that a lot. How you build a relationship with these guys, and it's all about the relationship, and he did that very well. When Dave got sick and wasn't able to go to work, I think that crushed him more than anything. He needed that, and he couldn't go down there. And before he had a stroke and he could talk, he used to tell me all the time that, he wants to be there. He wants to be with his guys. And it was tough on him. It was tough on him. We had a lot of mutual customers, Dave and I. And I do commercial graphics, so I would do a lot of work with his customers, were my customers. But he would always be sending me more customers. He would be looking after my interests all the time when a customer came in to him and needed signs or something. He would always say, "Hey, you want to get your sign done on your?" I have a sign guy, and he would always be looking after my interest. He was a big supporter of Crime Stoppers, as he said, and Dale Mendoza, sitting over here, he was a good friend of Dave's, and he's the president of Crime Stoppers, and we appreciated Dave being a big supporter of that. Dave and Lori worked as volunteers with the police department, as you heard, and you might have seen Dave in disguise as he went undercover as McGruff. So he enjoyed that a lot. As a volunteer, Dave and Lori made a lot of close friends in the police department. I can remember a few parties at Dave's house. And those officers can party pretty hard. "Fireball," Dave would shout out as the shots started circulating. Dave would be on the dance floor, grooving in the music and having the best time. As the night continued, there would be Dave straddling the fire pit and everyone edging him on. "Go, go, Dave, go." This was mini party that Dave and Lori had at their house. They had parties for neighbors, for friends, for a Corvette club. They always put on a good party, music, everything. It was fun. We had great times. One evening, the four of us, my wife, Dave, and Lori, we went out to dinner to celebrate Dave's birthday. Lydia and I were very excited about a cruise that we were going to go on and wanted Dave and Lori to join us. Dave, on a bet, said, "Are you signed up to go on the mystery Corvette run with the Corvette Club?" I responded, "No." Dave then said, "If you sign up for the Corvette run, I will go on the cruise." Lori, with excitement, "We're going on a cruise?" I think everybody in the restaurant heard her. This would be the first major vacation that they had been on in over a decade. Well, we went on the cruise to the Bahamas. And I remember Dave and Lori, they did every excursion that they had. You know, I mean, they should have done a video. They should have done a video of on the excursion. That would have been a good promotional video for the cruise lines. They did zip lining, and you guys did everything. So it definitely was the time of your life. That was a great, great trip. I just want to say it was an honor to have a friend as amazing as Dave. He will be missed by all of us deeply. I remember his kindness, his love, and his laugh. He had a great laugh. And he will always be in my heart forever. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
The last perspective before the Dave Dukes picture show, Jim. Jim, come on up. See, Steve, I didn't have to do this for you, but.
There's no way I was going to get through this without notes. Thank you, everyone, for being here. For those of you that were close to Dave, you knew that friends were family to him. There was no distinction. He treated everyone like family. So it means a lot that you're here. Good men pass from this world every day. However, few make the impact that David did on so many around him. He truly touched and changed the lives of so many people. And what I wanted to talk about today was how David changed my life. It's been said that the measure of a man is not in how he treats his equals, but rather how he treats those from whom he stands nothing to gain. And I don't need to tell those of you here how David treated all the people he loved. David came into my life, during a very difficult time. I was 6 or 7 years old. I'm not sure exactly. My parents had just went through a bad divorce, and my father had moved away. And he loved my mom very much, but he had nothing to gain from loving me the way he did, especially given how difficult I made it on him. It was a time where I felt like by showing him kindness, I felt like by showing him kindness, I was betraying my other parent. I don't know that I actively pushed him away, but I wasn't going to let him love me without a fight. And David never gave up on me or my sister. Dave took me on road calls at 2 o'clock in the morning so we could spend time together. He took me to the shop, let me drive the golf cart around and cause trouble and play with the dog they had there at the time. He took me jet skiing in December because I was too stupid to know how cold and miserable it would be. He did. He said, if you want to go, I'll take you. He loaded everything up, and I think we were out there for 5 minutes before I said, let's go home. He rarely missed a baseball or a football game. He showed me day in and day out that you don't have to be blood to be a father. A father's someone who's there for you, whether you want him to or not. And as time went on, we grew much closer. I got older and I moved away, and it's funny because I felt like the further we were apart, distance-wise, the closer we were. I don't even think my mom knows, but every once in a while I'd call him at work on his cell phone, just to ask him a question. I came to think of him as a friend, someone I could ask advice of or share a beer with. And now I have 4 children of my own, 3 of which are not by blood. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I would not be the father I am today if it wasn't for David. I will always be grateful to him. I will always remember the lessons he taught me. And I will always remember the example he set in his kindness and generosity, even from those from whom he stood nothing to gain. Thank you, everyone.
When he sang, I saw the light. Old Marty.
Someone wrote these words: "The only exercise we get lately is jumping to conclusions, running down friends, sidestepping responsibility, and pushing our luck." Kind of seems like a lot of that's been going on the last year or so, doesn't it? The only exercise we get is jumping to conclusions. When Joey Barrow was a teenager, his classmates used to laugh at him, and they labeled him a sissy. His mother made him take violin lessons, hoping that he would make something of himself. While his classmates were engaged in the rough and tough masculine activities, Joey was taking violin lessons. Everybody thought Joey was a sissy. Kids can be cruel, you know. His classmates openly mocked him. They were relentless in their ridicule, and one day, Joey was called a sissy one time too many. This time, Joey smashed the boy who taunted him smack on the head with his violin case. But that didn't help the situation. When the story reached the ears of Josie's schoolmates, it brought even more laughter and ridicule from them. One of the boys, however, did not laugh at Joey. This friend's name was Thurston McKinney. He was a big, strapping youngster, and he invited 18-year-old Joey to begin to exercise with him at the gym. And Joey did. And Joey got in better shape. Now, Thurston McKinney was a Detroit Golden Gloves boxing champion. And the very first time that Thurston invited Joey to spar with him in the ring, Joey knocked him out. 5 years later, Joey Barrow turned 23, and he became the heavyweight boxing champion of the world. You don't recognize the name Joey Barrow, do you? You see, his middle name was Lewis, and Joey Barrow was Joe Louis. Joey dropped the name Barrow so that his mother would not know that was her son they were talking about in the newspapers. The world knew long before his mama did that Joey Barrow had become the unbeatable Joe Louis. You see, Joey Barrow was anything but a sissy. Joey's schoolmates thought they knew him. They thought they knew what he was like, and how wrong they were. You see, it's so easy for us to reach a conclusion or make a judgment about somebody, and it can be wrong. Happens all the time. Not only do we come to wrong conclusions about each other, but we often come to wrong conclusions about God. We can easily believe things about God that aren't true. You see, depending on what small slice out of David's life you know, you could have a very different conclusion than somebody else from a different time and place and space. And the same is true of God. You see, so many of the perceptions and beliefs that exist today concerning God, in spite of their widespread acceptance, are absolutely incorrect. These incorrect perceptions of God are usually the result of personal pain, of national tragedy, or what people believe to be unanswered prayer. When our hearts are broken, when our bodies are racked with pain, or our personal and family life is crumbling around us, we're often tempted to think heretical thoughts: there must be no God. At other times, the evil acts of hardened people cause us to question God's power. A terrorist act, a natural disaster, a personal loss, something like COVID becomes the basis whereby we conclude that God isn't good, or he's not powerful, or he just simply doesn't care. Others would even say these things prove that God doesn't exist. If he was there, if he was good, if he was powerful, reasoning goes, he would intervene and prevent personal tragedy, natural disaster, and terrorist attacks. The painful and perplexing circumstances of life on this sin-marred world often give birth to very false ideas that come from feeling and beliefs that have no substance. If you and I are to avoid reaching wrong conclusions about each other, and if we are to not come to wrong conclusions about God, we must not depend solely on our feelings. Our feelings can change very quickly, and our feelings are the easiest thing to be deceived. Did you ever pay money to go see a horror movie as a kid? Okay, I'm a kid who grew up, you talked about Castillo's restaurant on Ventura, all right? I grew up on Orange Avenue off of Ventura. And John Castillo, the son of the original Castillos, was my junior high teacher. Ate there a lot of times. That Chinese restaurant at Butler and Cedar, that was on the way from our house to the fair, all right? So, no, right where you're talking about. But I used to pay 50 cents to go to a horror movie at the Wilson Theater. And I would sit there in that theater and my heart would beat fast and I would get a lump in my throat and I would sweat and I was absolutely terrified until all of a sudden my mind would engage and say, Tim, you paid money to be here. It's air conditioned, you're eating popcorn, none of those things, the house of wax, that's not where you are. You're in Wilson Theater. And all of a sudden all the feelings would subside. See, my feelings thought what I was experiencing was real. But it wasn't. And often we allow our feelings to carry us away into thinking things about God that are not real. Neither should we depend upon our own ability to reason, because sometimes our reasoning is not very reasonable. It has its limits. Speaking about our inability to determine God's ways, the prophet Isaiah said, as the heavens are high above the earth, so are God's ways above our ways, and his thoughts above our thoughts. I have some people who tell me over the years, Tim, if I just can't understand God, then he must not exist. Answer a question for me. Why would you want to put faith and confidence in a God that you could understand? What kind of God would he be if you and I were smart enough to figure him out? I want a God who is far beyond what I could possibly understand. Hebrews makes it very clear that God in times past spoke to us through the prophets at many times in many ways. And last, he's spoken to us through his Son, Jesus Christ. God didn't want us to depend upon our limited powers of reasoning or our unreliable feelings or our distorted perceptions. So what did God do? Jesus sent his Son. God sent his Son, Jesus Christ. Go back in history 2,000 years. Read all the literature you can, both in the Bible and out of the Bible, and you will come to very similar conclusions. No one ever lived like the one whose name was Jesus Christ. We are 2,000 years away from his life, from his death, from his resurrection, and the world can't stop talking about him. He still changes lives today. Why? Because he born, lived, and died? No. If that was all there was to him, we would have quit talking about him years ago. It's called Easter Sunday morning. It's Resurrection Day. It is the fact that he defeated death, hell, and the grave that makes us still talk about him today. Tim, why are there so many bad things going on in this world? It's because of a word that none of us like to use anymore. It's called sin. Crime Stoppers. Two of you mentioned Crime Stoppers. You really want to stop crime? Stop sin. But we're going to live in a world that's filled with trouble because we all have a bit of selfishness in us. We all jump to conclusions about other things and other circumstances, and we do things that are not good for ourselves or for others. And in spite of that, God still loves us. There were two thieves that were hung next to Jesus on the cross at his point of crucifixion. They reflect the two attitudes that we can have towards life, death, and eternity. They both had lived rough and tumble lives. They had taken whatever they wanted, and they ended up being crucified. And one of them maintained his attitude through life all the way through his death. And he looked over at Jesus and he made fun of him and he said, hey, if you really are who you say you are, get us all down from here so we can go back to the life that we lived. But the other one said, shut up. This is the Tim Rowland 21st century version of what he said, okay? It doesn't really say shut up, but he said, hey, stop. You and I are getting what we deserve. This one, pointing to Jesus, doesn't deserve this. He is who he says he is. And then here's his prayer. You want to write down a prayer? This one's much shorter than the Lord's Prayer. but it's an effective prayer. The thief next to Jesus said, "You are who you say you are. I am the result of what I've done in my life that has put me here. Would you remember me when you come into your kingdom?" And what did Jesus say to him? Okay, you need to go to church every Sunday for the next 52 weeks. You need to give a tenth of every bit of the money that you earn, and you need to help 50 poor people get better. Then maybe I'll consider it. Is that what he said? No, what did he say? Today, you will be with me in paradise. Not the fact that I'm going to keep you from dying today. That's the consequences of your deeds. But the consequences of your faith in praying to me in the last moments of your life, I'm taking you to my Father's house with me. Some of you are saying, that doesn't sound very fair. Last minute confession. No, this is not about fairness. This is about grace. And the grace that reached that criminal is the grace that reached David's heart, and it's a grace that can touch your heart in this very horrible, cruel world that we live in. There is a day coming in which this world will get its just desserts. I don't know when that is. But between now and then, God says, I will be sufficient in you to give you peace that passes understanding. What's that? That's peace in the midst of the terrors of COVID. I'll give you joy unspeakable, even when your circumstances dictate that you ought to be in tears. I can give you a sense of joy. Why? Because this world doesn't have the last say. Heaven does. Eternity. I've got a place prepared for you. The scripture says, don't be afraid of the person who can destroy your body. The one you need to be concerned with is who can destroy your soul. And Jesus said, I've come to give rest, not destruction, to your soul. We tend to be more concerned about the fleeting moments of our earthly life rather than our eternal future. 1 Corinthians 13:12 reminds us that in this world, we can only see through a glass darkly. We only know things partially. We don't yet have the liberated mind that God has in store for us in heaven. We still have the distraction of this world. But one day, we will see it all clearly. And he says, between now and then, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. Lori rarely left David's side in the last 18 months. But she was bound by space and time Sunday night a week ago. She couldn't go past his bedside. But the closing words in the prayer with David, as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you have nothing to be afraid of, David. Why? Because the shepherd is walking you through the valley to the front door of your Father's house. A place called heaven that has no more cancer, no more COVID, no more tears, no more death, no more sorrow. Pie in the sky? I'd say yes, if it wasn't for Jesus. He's the difference maker. It requires a little bit of faith. The one thief on the cross, remember me. You see, he understood what John would write later when that most famous scripture verse, for God so what? Loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. It's not any more complicated than that. It's not easy because we have to admit we need him. And oh, do we hate to admit we need anything. But God has made it simple. Admit. But we can't miss first base. We can't do it by good deeds. We can't do it by good works. I know David wasn't a baseball fan, but let me wrap it up with a baseball story. It was 1924. New York Giants and the Washington Senators, two teams that don't exist anymore. They played in the World Series, and it was a very close series. At the end of 6 games, it was tied 3 games to 3 games. The stadium was filled for that 7th and deciding game, and it was played in Washington. And they came to the 9th inning, and yes, the score was tied 2-2. New York was put down in order, and Washington was the home team, and they came to bat. the home team screamed for one lone run, which would win the game and the world championship. The first two men made outs, and it looked like this game would go into extra innings. And then a player by the last name of Goslin came to the plate. Anybody old enough to remember that guy's name? I'm not. I looked him up. He does exist. 2 strikes were called, and then 2 balls. The crowd was watching every pitch. On the 5th pitch, Goslin stepped into the ball and he slammed at it, which appeared to go over left center field. The crowd went nuts. They were delirious. It looked like a home run, but it hit 3 inches from the top of the fence and it fell back into the field of play. Goslin was slowing down for a triple heading into third base when the third base coach signaled him to head for an inside the park home run. He ran as fast as he could run for home plate. In a cloud of dust, he slid in, and it seemed like a mere split of a second he touched home plate before the tag. The umpire delayed the call, and finally, as the dust cleared, he raised his right hand. "You're out!" Fans were nuts. They were angry. They were mad. The Washington managers and players pushed to argue the call. The umpire announced he would consult with the other umpires. After the 4 umpires in that World Series game conferred for a moment or two, the umpire stepped to home plate and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, this batter is out because he missed first base." You can run hard all the way home. You can try to get to heaven by all of your good works and your good efforts. But folks, we get to heaven only by getting to first base. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. I'm not asking you to be Baptist or Presbyterian or Methodist or Catholic. You can be any one of those things and just simply be religious. Jesus Christ came to have a relationship with us. You got to get to first base. You got to propose marriage and have the preacher there to get married that very day. And Jesus is here. Just as he was with David in his home, and he walked him from earth to heaven, he is here to walk you out of the conclusions that you have jumped to about things that you've thought about God, and he's ready to walk you into his family. No fancy prayer, no special formula. You can do it here sitting on a pew as we pray. You can do it riding in your car on the way home. If you're driving, keep your eyes open, please. You can do it on the side of your bed. You can invite Jesus Christ in your heart, hanging on a cross. That's how much he loves us. You thought David loved you? Jesus loves you more. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, I am so grateful first and foremost for you, because you were the one who loved us so much that you saw our predicament and our problems and you did something about it. Father, I'm also grateful that you bring people into our lives that are unforgettable. You bring friends, you bring family, you even bring strangers who become like family because they're such good friends. And we're grateful for that. But most of all, Father, today I'm grateful that death doesn't have to have the final goodbye for friends and family. On the basis of grace, that is your generosity towards us. When we demonstrate the smallest amount of faith in who you are, you come quickly. You come to comfort. You come to care. You come to be sufficient in our lives. Thank you for hearing our honest confessions of our need for you, and you are willing and ready to come quickly into our lives. Thank you, Father, for the hope that we have that we will see David again, because we will see you. I trust you with the needs of David's family and of his friends. May they not only find comfort in their stories and their memories and their pictures, but Father, may we also find comfort in knowing that we can see David again. I believe that with all of my heart, or I would be anywhere else but here today. I commit this to you in the incredible name of Jesus Christ. Amen and amen. I want to thank you again so very much for being here and for being with the family on this day. They wish so very much. David would have loved nothing more than on this occasion that we had a big meal. But the circumstances don't allow that at this time to be like it would. And so maybe you'll see an invitation posted in the months ahead, all right? And we will come back together in a much more casual setting, and we'll enjoy that meal in honor of David's life. But I want to thank you so much for coming. I'm going to ask the staff from Farewell Funeral Services if they will come, and they're going to lead Lori and the family out through the side doors. And any of you as family that want to hang out in the pavilion area as the guests are dismissed, they can come out and greet you out there. And then for those of you who just want to head on home, you are welcome to do that as well. But gentlemen, if you would lead the family out through the side doors. And let's listen to a little George Jones music. Did you guys catch the change? It was hard to notice it, wasn't it? From Brooks and Dunn to George Jones. It was so subtle. That key was the same, and I had to do a double take. Guys, follow right on out.
Thanks for joining us online and worshiping with us. New Hope has many different ministries that operate in a lot of different areas. And it's also for many different age groups. If you'd like to learn more about these ministries, or if you'd like to learn how to serve in these ministries, then please feel free to contact the office, either through our website, by email, or by telephone. Also, if you've recently given your life to Jesus Christ, if you have taken that important step of accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, then we'd love to hear from you. It's a very important step. And first, we want to celebrate with you. It's an event in your life that's well worth celebrating. So if you'd like to talk to Pastor Tim or myself about this particular subject, because it is something that brings up a lot of different questions and thoughts in your mind, then we'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one, either by Zoom or in person or by telephone. Or if you just have questions from sermon today or from other sermons, and you really want to see what it takes to get to that next step, then also contact us and we'll meet with you. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks for joining us today.